Despite tough global economic conditions, there will be a boom in the number of millionaires and billionaires coming out of this here continent, Africa, over the next decade. At least that's according to figures published in the latest Henley Global Citizens Report. The report tracks private wealth and investment migration trends worldwide. Interestingly, Mauritius is forecast to have the highest growth in high net worth individuals for the next decade at 80%. South Africa is predicted to see a 40% growth in the high net worth individuals. Andrew Amoils, the head of research at the New World Wealth that conducted this research, joins us now in studio. And Amanda Smit, who is managing partner at Henley and Partners, who have focused on the investment migration trends, also joins us. She does so via Zoom. A very good morning to you first, Andrew, of course, because you are in studio with us, as well as you, Amanda, of course, where you are as well. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us. So let's just start with how the research came about, for you guys to find this and how it got to. I actually want to put into why the next decade, how do you see that it's happening in the next decade and what trends exactly, I'll get to Amanda with that, but what exactly it is you guys follow to try and get to this kind of research?
Well, we've been doing wealth research on about 90 countries, about 150 cities globally since 2013. And basically, we've been doing the Africa Wealth Report also with Henley and Partners. And we recently put out the Global Citizens Report, as you mentioned. And essentially, we have a database of high net worths that we track. We also look at, obviously, all the income trends in the country, the property price trends, and the stock market trends, because those are the main things that feed into wealth. And then we basically work out how many high net worths there are each year. And then obviously the top tiers, like the billionaires and the centimillionaires, they're more well known publicly, so you can track their wealth on an individual basis.
Well, maybe we could ask you this one, Amanda, because, as the research states that we're going to be seeing a lot more emerging millionaires and billionaires as well. I think actually looking at correlating with that is the fact that South Africa is seen as the most unequal country in the world, if not one of the most unequal countries in the world. So one wonders, these emerging millionaires and billionaires, do we know exactly which specific sectors of industry they'll be coming from? And is there space for younger, for example, millionaires and billionaires to come out of what we call, emerging markets, especially on the African continent?
Yes, good morning. Thanks for having me. From my point of view, yes, definitely. Obviously, we assist a lot of clients from Africa who are seeking to obtain, alternative residency or citizenship in alternative jurisdictions. But to answer that specific question, yes, definitely there's a lot of opportunity for South Africa as this big emerging market, bringing more foreign investors into the country itself. And most certainly we are not just seeing a trend of South Africans wanting to immigrate. In fact, it's quite the opposite is true. We're seeing more people just wanting country diversification rather than fleeing the country at this moment.
Andrew, Mauritius is, of course, seen as a holiday destination, so many would be surprised to see that they have the highest percentage of, emerging millionaires and billionaires. Does the fact that they are a holiday destination and that, there's always so much pumped into their economy, contribute to that? Or is it a matter of just how the economy and how the people of Mauritius have just essentially been going about their business?
I think the Mauritius story started quite a long time ago. I remember doing research years ago, maybe 20 years ago, on offshore flows. And almost about 40 or 50% of the offshore flows that were going out of South Africa were going through Mauritius even then. So they already had a huge offshore banking industry 20 years ago. And I think what they did was they expanded that into a lot of other financial services, like wealth management. And essentially, they attracted a lot of wealth from other countries, but mainly they just managed to build their economy and become the sort of hub for financial services in Africa and also globally. They work a lot with some countries in Asia and Australia. So they're basically a corridor between Africa and the rest of the eastern side of the globe, you could say. So they've... and also, they attract a lot of wealthy people, so they've put a lot of incentives in place that allow people to get residence there if they buy a home for over $300,000. Actually, I think it's $375,000. if they buy a home, they get residency. And that's also encouraged a lot of people to move there, because they don't have capital gains tax and they don't have inheritance tax, although they've got income tax. So they're certainly not a tax haven, but they've got quite competitive tax structure. So there's a lot of factors that have driven their growth.
Yeah. You know, as we're taking a look at even some of Mauritius, we're looking at Algeria, for example, that is also coming up. When it comes to policy certainty and being able to hone in on the investment opportunities, I think, Amanda, more of the time it's around investors wanting the policy certainty so that they are able to know that where their money is going or their capital gains are going or their direct, capital investment is going is actually going to yield fruitful results. Are we seeing this story to be true of the African story, irrespective of even some of the policies uncertainties we've seen in some of these countries?
Yes, that's absolutely true. There are a number of drivers that want people to obtain alternative residency. So at the moment, within the African continent, there really is only the Mauritius residency by investment, which has proven to be incredibly popular, especially from people from South Africa. And there are a number of reasons. But if we look at it from a bigger perspective in terms of the global spectrum, the most drivers or reasons why people are looking to diversify their countries is definitely, first of all, because they need to invest in a country where they know that's going to bring about a good yield for them. At the same time, it comes with all the traditional benefits of global mobility. These days, we're looking at global warming. We're looking at the effects of what the pandemic had on a specific country, better healthcare facilities, better education opportunities for their children, the opportunity to increase businesses into other jurisdictions. And those are the reasons why countries also create these investment migration programs. Not only does it really bring about a lot of foreign direct investment into the country so that they can create a better economy without having to burden the debt or tax rates in that specific country, and then obviously the applicant or the investor does then really benefit from all the benefits that comes with it.
I want to throw this at you, Andrew, because we were even having this conversation a little bit off air regarding how is a millionaire formed in South Africa? Now, we saw a lot of millionaires boom through the COVID-19 pandemic, hard lockdown, because a lot of people were stealing, right? It was not necessarily about millionaires that actually worked for their money. It was those that were stealing from the pocket of the state so that they can enrich themselves. And then, of course, they became wealthy through, procurement processes that were really shoddy. In this case, when we're forecasting this growth trajectory of about over 40% within the next couple of years or so, how is it? Are we able to tell whether or not these millionaires will come out of shoddy dealings or, dealings that the state has to fund illegally so? Because it's one thing to be a millionaire, but if I got a procurement contract illegally or irregularly, I don't know if I can consider myself, you can be a millionaire in terms of rands and the sorts, but did you really earn it? Do you even earn the title?
Well, I think it's a tricky one from our point of view, because if you hadn't made your money in a legitimate way, we probably wouldn't classify that person as a millionaire. Because of the way that we actually work it out. We mainly work off listed company holdings and things like that.
Yeah.
Because very difficult to value people based on private company holdings. So our figures tend to be a little bit lower than some of the other vendors when it comes to the number of millionaires globally and in South Africa. So essentially, we wouldn't classify someone that had made their money illegitimately as a millionaire anyway, because they probably wouldn't come up with a lot of listed company holdings, so certainly not public holdings. It's a tricky one. I think there are probably more millionaires. Our current estimates have 40,000 millionaires, or that's US dollar millionaires in investable assets in South Africa. But if you included the ones you mentioned, it would probably be another 10, 15,000 millionaires.
Sure.
So it'd probably be around 55,000 US dollar millionaires in South Africa. Yeah.
Amanda, I know we're just looking at a period of the next decade here, but are we able to get an idea as to whether beyond the next decade, if this growth would still be there? So, for example, or if there would even be a decline. So could we see Mauritius's 80% becoming 60%, South Africa's 40% becoming 70%? Are we seeing any kind of, is this some kind of marker that we could look beyond the next decade to see whether or not there is this millionaire, billionaire growth or decline on the continent?
Really difficult question. I suppose that's really, in my opinion, a better question for Andrew, who did the research to predict on. Obviously, if we see the current trend of the growing millionaires and we look at all the job creation and we look at all the opportunities, then one would hope that the trend would certainly continue. But I'm not equipped to answer that question in quite a lot of detail.
Maybe, Andrew, actually, you could help us.
Yeah.
Are we able to see beyond the next 10 years if, there could be a growth or a decline?
I think a lot will depend on the main drivers of growth. So if you look at the main drivers of growth globally, you're talking about safety, especially like child safety, women's safety, those types of things. And if that improved, then South Africa's growth would almost certainly improve. So from that forecast. On the flip side, if it got worse, then our projections might be slightly on the high side. I think one of the things that's always been in Mauritius's favor is it is very safe, and it's becoming safer all the time. Even countries like China, which obviously is not that safe, is becoming safer. And that's one of the reasons why it's had such good wealth growth. That's one of the things that's held India back, why they haven't really been able to grow at the same rate as China, is because they've never really been able to sort out their safety issues.
Yeah.
And South Africa is by no means the least safe country in the world. I think sometimes it gets that rap because there's only about 30 countries globally that actually publish transparent safety data. So you're not really comparing yourself to everyone. But yeah, it's certainly if South Africa was able to improve the safety, I think it would have a big effect. And it could, as you say, reach a level of 70% growth over the next decade.
Yeah, safety, one thing. Perhaps even predictable power supply could be another thing.
Yes.
You can't operate a business if you're going to have a stage 2, stage 3 load shedding and stage 6 load shedding.
Yes.
It just does not make sense. But I think one thing that is becoming very clear, and I wonder how we can even rewrite that narrative, Andrew, and perhaps even you, Amanda, are able to step into this, is that when we're talking about 40,000 or 55,000, dollar millionaires in this country, it's still speaking about, what, 1% of the South African population. I wish it was more than that. If we're looking at, for example, South Africa having a population of about 60 million people,
yes,
we're still sitting at a very low percentage of how many dollar millionaires, which goes back to the statistics around how 1% of this country owns probably about 10 or 20% of the wealth, which means that there's still an unequal distribution, a significant unequal distribution of wealth. What would it take, from even the research and also from looking at other emerging markets, for example, across the globe, who are similar to the South African story? What would it take for us to broaden the playing field so that when you and I have a conversation, we have another conversation like this, it's not about 55,000 determining the livelihoods of 60 million people, but rather it's about, okay, guys, we're seeing that we've got about $2 million millionaires or $3 million millionaires in this country, because I think that's a real reason to celebrate then. Yes.
Well, going back to what you said initially in terms of the percentage of wealth that the millionaires hold, it is around 40%. So the US dollar millionaires, those 40,000, they control about 40% of South Africa's wealth.
Ooh.
Having said that, on a global basis, the global ratio is about 36%. So it's not that much different. Actually, the country that's got the worst ratio, interestingly, is Russia. Russia, about 60% of the wealth is held by the millionaires. And it's particularly the top end, because they don't actually have that many millionaires, but they've got a lot of people right on the top, the centaur millionaires, the billionaires there. So that's an interesting story. If you look at the countries that have the least share, like that's Japan. Japan only, the millionaires only control about 22% of the wealth in Japan.
Yeah, no, I struggle with this. I don't know if you do
scary.
as well.
No,
yeah,
it's
it's 55,000, 60 million people.
I mean, we'd all like to be rich, would we not? But, I mean, if we're not all going to be rich, can at least there be some sort of a balance of scales,
100%.
which at this moment it doesn't seem that there ever will be. But yes, of course, that is Andrew Amoils, of course, the head of research at New World Wealth, and Amanda Smit, of course, joining us via Zoom. She's the managing partner for Henley and Partners. Thank you very much, guys, for joining us and painting what is seemingly somewhat of a scary picture for South Africans. But thank you very much.